Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on SERDP funding opportunities. My name is Deanne Ryder, and I will be moderating today's call. We will get started in a few moments. While we wait for others to log on, I would like to cover a few logistical items. Today's broadcast will be listen only. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. You may submit questions by using the chat box in the left-hand portion of the screen. You need not wait until the Q&A period to submit your questions. We encourage you to submit them in advance of that session. The phone lines will remain listen only throughout the presentation, so we will not be taking any questions verbally. We will not be able to answer any questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar. If you run into any technical difficulties involving the presentation or call-in line, please contact the ReadyTalk technical support note, as noted in the meeting confirmation email. Please note that both the audio and the presentation of today's session will be archived on our solicitation webpage in case you would like to refer to them in the future. Today's speakers are Dr. Ann Andrews, the Acting Executive Director of SERDP, and Dr. Andrea Leeson, the Deputy Director of SERDP and the Environmental Restoration Program Manager. Before I turn it over to Ann and Andrea, I remind phone participants that this is a listen-only session, and to submit questions, please use the chat box in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Ann?
Thank you, Deanne. And I'll add my welcome to the webinar about the SERDP FY17 funding opportunities. I'll begin by walking through some information about the process and start talking about some of the statements of need, and then I will hand it off to Andrea about halfway through. As some of you may know, we run two programs out of our office. SERDP, the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program, is a science and technology program, and ESTCP, the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, is a demonstration and validation program. And today's focus is on the SERDP solicitation for projects to begin in 2017. A little bit of background information about SERDP. It was established by Congress in fiscal year 1991. It's officially a partnership between the DoD, the DOE, and the EPA. And all of those entities play an active role in the governance and management of SERDP. SERDP is a requirements-driven program that focuses on high-priority science and technology requirements in the Defense Department. We fund advanced technology development and basic and applied research. SERDP covers a wide variety of technical topics. We think of them as being divided into two large buckets of environmental drivers. The first is the reduction of current and future liabilities. The current liabilities result from the contamination due to past practices, and that includes contaminated groundwater, soils and sediments, unexploded ordnance, and emerging contaminants. The other half of the contamination problem is preventing future contamination, which is traditional pollution prevention, eliminating the pollutants and hazardous materials in our manufacturing and maintenance operations. The other major set of drivers has to do with the sustainability of our ranges, facilities, and operations. And this covers a wide spectrum of technical topics, including marine mammals, threatened and endangered species, noise, dust, climate change, and sustainable forward operating basis. We manage the SERDP program through 4 program areas: weapon systems and platforms, environmental restoration, munitions response, and resource conservation and climate change. And you'll see as we get to the SONs, the statements of need that we're specifically soliciting for this year, that they're organized by program area. We put out 2 solicitations in SERDP. One is the core solicitation. It has its own set of statements of need. Here we expect to primarily fund multi-year proposals, although we look at limited scope proposals as well for projects where data needs to be developed before a full proposal could be really scoped. We put out both a broad agency announcement for universities, industry, and government and non-governmental organizations, and a federal call for proposals that is open to both DoD and other federal agencies. And we expect multiple awards for each statement of need under the core solicitation. We also put out a SERDP exploratory development, our SEED statements of need. Here we're looking at high-risk, high-payoff work in a project of limited duration to prove proof of concept. So projects are limited to $200,000 or less in total funding and approximately 1 year in duration. We also put out both a BAA and a federal call under the SEED solicitation, and SEED projects that are successful are then eligible for follow-on funding. I'll spend a moment or two walking through the solicitation process. The broad agency announcement and federal call for proposals went out at the end of October. They seek pre-proposals that are 5 pages in length and don't require a detailed budget. Those proposals are evaluated by our staff during the month of January, and we request full proposals approximately the first week of February. The full proposals are due in March, and they are sent out for a formal peer review to scientific experts in the field. Based on the peer review, proposals are sent to our technical committees, which are made up of DOD, DOE, and EPA managers that help us make decisions about projects to fund. Then the SERDP selected projects are required to go before our Science Advisory Board for final approval. The next chart just shows the solicitation dates. Pre-proposals will be due on January 7th. We will send out the request for full proposals of the first week of February, with full proposals due on March 8th. Selections will be conducted in the June and July timeframe, with notifications sent out in generally mid to late July. Science Advisory Board will meet in September and October to review the New START projects that are selected out of this solicitation, and we expect project initiation to begin in the spring of 2017. The SEED selection process is somewhat simplified compared to the core process. Again, we put out both a broad agency announcement and a federal call for proposals. There is no pre-proposal process in the SEED solicitation, so we ask for a fully developed proposal to be submitted. That is reviewed by our staff and the technical committee, and then the selections for this are not required to go before the Science Advisory Board. And these proposals will only be peer reviewed if the SEED project is successful and we request a follow-on multi-year proposal. The next chart shows the SEED dates. The full proposals are due to us on March 8th. These selections will be announced in the July-August timeframe, with project initiation generally to begin in the spring of 2017. The next chart just shows some statistics from the most recent solicitation, where we received 240 pre-proposals against the statements of need that were published for 16. Of those, we requested 107 full proposals, and you can see yourself what the success rates were for the various solicitations. Now we'll move on from process to talk a little bit about the statements of need. I'll begin with the resource conservation and climate change statements of need. The first one has to do with understanding the phenological response to changing climate on DoD lands and waters and the implications for management. And here what we mean by phenology is the study of periodic plant and animal life cycle events and how they are influenced by seasonal or interannual variations in abiotic features such as climate, light, and elevation. And what we're looking for in this statement of need is to improve our understanding of how plant and animal species on DoD installations respond to abiotic features in the environment and how they may change under non-stationary climate conditions. We're looking for key interactions that involve species management of concern to DoD resource managers. And the species of interest include terrestrial, freshwater aquatic, and nearshore marine species for which DoD has management responsibilities. And finally, it's important under this statement of need that the proposals should demonstrate an understanding of the appropriate use and limitations of available climate information. The next statement of need in resource conservation and climate change has to do with the long-term ecological studies, testing previous hypotheses and conclusions. Many times when we do ecological research, we're constrained by the DoD contracting limitations in the amount of data and the amount of time that we're able to monitor. So the intent of this statement of need is to collect and analyze additional data associated with previously completed ecological studies whose ultimate tests of theory, treatment success, or management relevance require timeframes longer than those typical research projects. And we're looking to focus on data sets that either were obtained as part of a previously completed SERDP project or that resulted from other funded work at any DoD relevant study area where sufficient data exists to conduct a thorough follow-up evaluation. This statement of need is seeking projects that are only 2 years in duration. We're expecting this to be a snapshot look for a year or two of data collection following the prior work. And there's not a firm limitation, but we're expecting that these will be modest-sized projects, approximately $250,000 in total funding. The final statement of need in the resource conservation and climate change area is a seed statement of need, and it's looking for useful climate information at moderate timescales. And this is one of the statements of need where we expect high risk, high payoff, proof of concept type work. And so we're looking to provide credible and relevant time information at moderate timescales of 2 to 20 years into the future that will address the needs of DoD installation managers. Specifically, we call out the need for characterizing uncertainty, understanding modes of climate variability, understanding regional trends with strong directionality but perhaps unknown magnitude, using recent historical signals to update non-stationarity of the climate signal, and finally for developing frameworks to use this climate information properly in this time frame. One of the important aspects of a seed is that it identifies the expected outcome. That is, explicitly discussing the methods, outcomes, and metrics for success that would justify follow-on funding. The next two statements of need are in the munitions response program area. The first is the detection, classification, and remediation of military munitions in the underwater environment. And here, this is a fairly wide open statement of need, looking for understanding the characteristics of munitions in the underwater environment and how they will impact the performance of sensors and systems, looking at wide area surveys to identify areas of contamination and areas where no munitions are present, detailed surveys to identify individual munitions for removal, and cost-effective recovery and disposal. There are a wide variety of environmental conditions and munitions that are of interest. Proposals need not address the entire range of those conditions. And finally, proposals addressing contamination of soils and water by munitions constituents are not of interest under this statement of need. Finally, the other statement of need in the munitions response area is calling for a preliminary design study for munitions response underwater test site. SERDP and ESTCP both have been supporting the development of sensors for this environment, and they've reached the point of maturity where it is necessary that we start to put together some sort of underwater test site for collecting comparative data among them. So we're looking to conduct in a limited scope project a preliminary design study. Some of the considerations are listed here, a variety of site conditions and environment. The test site or test sites must be appropriate for as large a subset of these conditions as possible. The successful design could involve items that are easily deployable or in fixed locations that cover a variety of conditions. Again, the interest is from small projectiles and mortars to large bombs. The primary interest of both programs has been in water depths of up to 35 meters, but there's really a specific need for Sensors that can operate in very shallow water environments of less than 5 meters, so we would like the test site to make sure to accommodate that. Here we're looking for limited scope proposals of up to $200,000 and approximately 1 year in duration. And at this point, I will turn it over to Andrea to continue walking through the statements of need.
Thank you, Anne. Our next statements of need fall under the Weapons System and Platforms Program area, and we have 5 statements of need that were released under this program area, 3 core proposals and 2 for seed proposals. The first core statement of need is looking for proposals to develop a fluorine-free surfactant formulation for use in aqueous film-forming foam fire suppression operations. As noted in the statement of need, the new formulations proposed must be compatible with existing AFFF, and supporting equipment must meet specific performance requirements. In addition, proposals should include testing to validate the persistence and aquatic toxicity of the alternative materials. Finally, while this isn't required at the pre-proposal stage, for those full proposals that are requested, proposers will need to establish a baseline life cycle framework and identify elements of a life cycle inventory that are already known, those that will be investigated during the project, and those that are beyond the scope of the proposed work. The second core statement of need under the Weapons System and Platforms Program area is focused on developing sustainable, non-ozone depleting, low global warming potential refrigerants for military applications. In order to meet military requirements for efficiency, materials compatibility, flammability, and toxicity, proposals may develop novel second-generation ODS alternatives, explore options for modifying formulas or systems, or develop new alternative formulations, blends, or refrigeration technologies. The proposed solutions must maintain a low global warming potential. Also, as I mentioned in the previous statement of need, all proposals should include the assessment of human health and environmental impacts of the proposed ingredients, formulations, and byproducts. And in addition, again, for those proposals that are selected for a full proposal, the baseline life cycle framework will need to be identified. The third core statement of need under the Weapons System and Platforms Program area is focused on developing non-chemical methods and processes to impart surface morphology modification to metallic substrates. There are a number of specific requirements for this statement of need, as shown here. In addition, proposals should include efforts to develop a quantitative understanding of how the proposed technology addresses the SON performance objectives. The first of our 2 seed statements of needs is focused on developing an understanding of the degradation mechanisms of coatings materials induced by fungi. There's particular concern with the newer resin systems and non-chromate pigments. Successful projects must identify the primary constituents of the coatings that are susceptible to attack, the specific means of attack, and a path to develop solutions to mitigate or eliminate the problem. It's especially important that the proposed solutions not compromise the environmental benefits of the target materials or degrade the performance. The last Weapons System and Platforms Proposal solicitation is a seed statement of need, and that's focused on developing innovative synthetic approaches to produce energetic materials and their precursors that will eliminate or drastically reduce hazardous waste streams from nitration processes widely used in manufacturing energetic materials. Proposals must focus on either the synthesis of an aromatic or heteroaromatic nitro compound, the synthesis of a nitramine, or synthesis of a nitrate ester. Proposals also would be considered for more broad-based research to develop the fundamentals of synthetic methodologies as related to energetic materials without specific targeted compounds. Next, we have the Environmental Restoration Program Area Statements of Need. 3 statements of need were released under this program area, with the first focus on improving our ability to treat mixed contaminants of concern in groundwater, a common issue we encounter at DoD sites. There are several specific sub-objectives listed for this SON, from developing a greater understanding of the effect of intrinsic physical, chemical, and biological properties and their associated impact on contaminant behavior and fate in low mobility zones, as well as developing protocols that can be used to establish achievable remedial goals, assess treatment performance, and estimate remedial outcome based on potential treatment synergies for the targeted contaminants of concern. Mixtures of chlorinated compounds with 1,4-dioxane or some of the perfluoroalkyl compounds are of particular interest, but we will consider proposals that target other mixtures if the proposal can demonstrate that the mixed contamination is present and a concern at a DoD site. The next two statements of need under the Environmental Restoration Program area were identified during a workshop that we held this past July that was focused on the management of munitions constituents. The workshop report can be found on our SERDP website, and we've updated the statements of need to provide the link directly to this workshop report. And the workshop report provides a summary of the various discussions that occurred throughout the course of the workshop. The first of these statements of need is focused on developing standardized sampling and analytical techniques for munitions constituents, specifically for DNAN, NTO, and nitroguanidine and their daughter products, as well as the nitrophenols, picric acid, ammonium picrate, and dinitrophenol in environmental matrices including soil, groundwater, and surface water. Development of standardized extraction methods for these same munitions constituents in soils, sediments, plant and animal tissues, and biota is also of interest. The second statement of need identified from this workshop is focused on improving our understanding of the fate and effects of DNAN and NTO. Specific sub-objectives focus on development of prediction techniques, collection of fate and transport determining properties, improved models, and toxicity evaluations. For any of these statements of needs, if you have specific questions on some of the details of them, please contact the program manager that's listed in the statement of need at the end of the document. Next, I'd like to go through the proposal selection criteria for our core proposals. The various criteria are listed here. The very first item we look at is the relevance, and this is a pass-fail criteria. And very specifically, we're looking at whether the proposed technology or body of work addresses the SON objectives. It's very important that you clearly understand what's being asked for in the statement of need, and you make it very clear how your proposed work is addressing those statements of need. Next, we will look at technical merit, assuming the proposal passes the gate of the pass-fail. Technical merit is by far the most heavily weighted section of the proposals, and so this is where you should spend most of your time on the proposal. The next criteria, personnel, cost, transition plan, and small business participation are all items that we look at for the proposals. Next, we have the seed selection criteria. This is a little different than for the core proposals. Two key ones that are the same are the relevance. Again, we look for a pass-fail here as to whether the proposed effort addresses the SON objectives. And then again, the technical merit, by far the most important section of the proposal. And then with all of the seed proposals, we do also look at the transition potential. And it's important to show that you have a clear identification what is the proof of concept that's being determined in the proposal, and that you have identified a future development path, assuming that the project is successful. For a competitive proposal, we can consider four different areas. As I've already mentioned, it's very important that your proposal clearly addresses the statement of need and that you've clearly stated which objective or sub-objectives you're addressing with your work. It's important that your proposal demonstrates that you have a clear understanding of the state of the science that's supporting your effort. We'd like to see that you have proposed hypothesis-driven work and can clearly state what the hypotheses are for the proposed effort. And the proposal should be focused on the technical approach, as I mentioned previously, with a very detailed technical approach, preferably structured into tasks, and a clear experimental design. Additional information about the program and the solicitation itself can be found on our website. And at this point, I'll turn it back to Deanne for the question and answer period.
Great. We have had a number of questions, and we'll answer as many as time permits, focusing on those that are generally applicable to all submitters or logistical in nature. Please note that we will not be able to answer any questions about specific proposal ideas or technologies during this webinar. The first question, what is the typical cost and duration of a SERDP project?
We don't actually specify, with the exception of the limited scope and the seed solicitations, which are 1 year in duration and no more than $200,000, we don't specify the length of the project or the amount of money. They should be scoped to accomplish the work that's proposed. That said, SERDP projects range from $100,000 to multi-year million-dollar projects and can range up to 5 years in duration. A typical SERDP project might be in the $300,000 to $500,000 per year, 3 to 4 year range, but there's a tremendous amount of variability around that.
The next question is, will proposals from foreign organizations be accepted?
We do accept proposals from foreign organizations. We have no limitation on who submits proposals.
Great. If a team consists of both private sector and federal partners, should proposals submit to the BAA or federal call?
That is really at the discretion of the offerer. We have the ability to evaluate the proposals through both of those submittal mechanisms. So really it's a matter of what makes sense for the technical work that's proposed and who makes sense as the lead.
Can a pre-proposal submitted to a previous solicitation but not funded be submitted again this year?
The pre-proposal could be submitted again as long as it's also relevant to the statement of needs that have been released this year. Again, as discussed under the criteria for selection, it's very important that it's clear that the proposal is addressing the stated objectives of the statement of need.
Great. Is there any flexibility with the pre-proposal due date?
No, there's not. To be fair to all offerers, the due date and time are both not flexible.
Could an individual contact SERDP to discuss an idea before submitting a pre-proposal?
No, we do not discuss actual ideas in advance of the pre-proposal submittal. That's really the purpose of the pre-proposal submittal. Those are shorter documents, only about 5 pages in length, and that is what's really used to vet the ideas. If you have more general questions about the process or something that's not clear in a statement of need, then please do contact us with those questions.
Is there a limit to the number of pre-proposals that an individual or organization can submit?
No, there is not.
Do pre-proposals submitted to the BAA require a DoD team member or partner?
And no, they don't require any specific type of team member or partner.
How will the intellectual property in a proposal be protected?
All of the reviewers that we use to evaluate proposals sign non-disclosure agreements or are subject to non-disclosure agreements as terms of their federal employment. And so we protect your intellectual property throughout the proposal process.
How detailed must the budget be at the pre-proposal stage?
We do not require a detailed budget at the pre-proposal stage. In general, we also say that you don't need to run costs through your accounting office or that section of your organization in order to generate the costs. The costs are meant to be a reasonable estimate of cost per year for the length of the project.
For the phenology SON, does all research need to be conducted on DoD land?
Not necessarily. It needs to be clear in the proposal that whatever the site is, it is relevant to DoD management concerns. That said, we generally expect that if the work proposed is highly relevant to DoD, that you should be able to find a DoD site. But if you have ongoing work somewhere else that would make sense for that to be a better place to do the work, we certainly would consider that.
Is a pre-proposal required for a core limited scope proposal?
Yes, if you're submitting a limited scope proposal, you must meet all the submittal requirements as is for a full proposal.
Great, thanks. As a PhD student, what would be the procedure to submit a proposal?
It would be the same as anyone else. You would follow the instructions. I would say that it would be fairly rare for a PhD student-led proposal to be competitive simply because of the management responsibilities, the need to have long-term support at the institution. So if you chose to submit a proposal, I would make sure that you covered the relevant experience and the support of the institution thoroughly so that we would not be worried about that.
How many of the core solicitation awards are the result of a prior seed proposal?
In general, none of them are the result of a prior seed proposal. Follow-on efforts to successful seed proposals are dealt with in a separate manner from the annual solicitations.
Great, thanks. We've had a number of questions related to if electronic copy of the presentation will be available.
The presentation is being archived and will be made available on the SERDP website.
Does the ERSON3 focus exclusively on DNAN and NTO, or rather on DNAN, NTO, and new and sensitive munitions prior to development?
It was meant to focus on DNAN and NTO. These were to understand the fate and effects of these compounds at this time, not to predict future effects of different sorts of compounds.
Great. What is a reasonable range of funding to request in a proposal for ERSON1?
We don't really state what type of funding is suggested for the statements of need. You should be planning your budget to meet the objectives of your own proposal, what you think is needed, what level of effort is needed to accomplish what you're proposing. That being said, proposal efforts often range from anywhere 100 to 400K per year on an average of 3 to 4 years. There's a pretty wide range of costs on what we receive. It depends heavily on the scope of work for a proposal.
Great. For the new refrigerants project listed under this solicitation, could the core project involve a university, company, foreign entity, combined team, and are consultants allowed in the project?
Yes. You should put together whatever team you think is appropriate to do the work. And if it's a combination of a university and a foreign entity, that's fine. There's no limitation on putting a consultant on your team if that's the expertise that you need.
Can multiple proposals be submitted by the same PI?
Yes, we have no limitation on how many proposals one person can submit.
Is there a preference for basic research, applied research, or advanced technology development?
Not necessarily. SERDP supports all of that range of research and development. But if you look at the individual statements of need, you'll see that some of them are much more technology development focused, and some of them are much more fundamental understanding focused. So you should propose what is relevant to meet the objectives of the statement of need.
Great. For improved strategies for remediating mixed contaminants in the groundwater, is it a core or a seed solicitation?
That is a core solicitation with the opportunity to also submit a limited scope proposal.
For the seed evaluation, I had a bullet related to the basic research, applied research, or tech demo. However, it was not clear which was made for these, which SERDP was actually seeking. Could you clarify?
Certainly, that's sort of related to the prior question that SERDP is by statute permitted to fund basic and applied research and advanced technology development. SERDP does not fund technology demonstrations. And so what that evaluation criteria is getting at is that it has to fall within the scope of what we're legally allowed to spend money on in the SERDP budget line. That said, what I said about the prior question is still relevant, that some of the statements of need are much more geared towards advanced technology development, some are more geared towards developing a fundamental understanding, and both are equally acceptable to meet the objectives of the statement of need.
Great, thank you. Can any portion of work be performed overseas because of unique facilities and lower costs?
Yes, portions of a project can be performed overseas. It is useful to make it clear what those unique facilities are and what are the cost impacts.
For the testbed proposal, do you prefer if it is in saltwater or freshwater sites?
I don't think that there is specifically a preference now. There is a need for technologies in both environments. Obviously, some technologies will be influenced by salinity. So I would say to propose what you think is relevant to the sensors and the operating environment that you're considering in your proposal.
Are there any opportunities for additional funding through matching funds?
We do not get involved in the issue of matching funds. Certainly an individual can seek that from other institutions, but our organization does not get involved in that.
For climate change and natural resources, it sounds like most of the interest is in how climate change affects the animal and plants. Are you interested in water quality and surface water contamination at the watershed scale?
We have put out solicitations in SERDP and also in ESTCP dealing with a wide variety of natural resource issues over the years. This year, the particular statements of need that we're putting out are related primarily to the climate change.
Will improved strategies for remediating mixed contaminants in groundwater, SON, will it only accept methods that will be effective in low permeability zones?
No, this was not only applicable to the low permeability zones. That was an objective of one of the specific sub-objectives that were listed, but not for the entire statement of need.
Is the intended target of the phenology core SON for endangered species or all ecosystems and species under the DoD jurisdiction?
It is not meant to be limited to threatened and endangered species, but you do definitely need to make the case that it's something that has a DoD management concern.
Great, thank you. That is the last more general question that we have received. There are other questions which are more specific to the statement of need or technology. For those questions, we ask that you contact the program manager for that specific area as noted in the point of contact section for each statement of need. Thank you for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, the presentation and audio will be archived for future reference on the SERDP solicitation webpage. This concludes today's webcast.